Greetings, APUSH scholars, coming to you from the library. APUSH Review, Unit 3 on the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution, and the administrations of George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson, going from the top to the bottom on your review sheet. Republicanism refers to a government where the people hold sovereignty. There is no one person in charge, and there is certainly no monarch, and this is the type of government we had after the Revolutionary War, a republic. Republican motherhood refers to the notion that it is the job of good American women to raise up little republicans. That's with a small r, children who believe in self-government, children who do not believe in monarchy, children who believe in participatory rule. The Articles of Confederation is the name of the government we had between the end of the Revolutionary War and the Constitution. It actually starts during the Revolutionary War, and the Articles of Confederation is a voluntary union of the states. And one of the successes of the Articles is it's going to win the war, and it is going to sign a good peace treaty, the Treaty of Paris, which gives us not only the departure of English troops and our independence, but gives us land all the way to the Mississippi River and fishing rights off the coast of Canada. Other successes are land disputes over land on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. These land disputes end when the Articles of Confederation government, the Congress, receives control of all this western land and proceeds to come up with a reasonable, orderly way of distributing that land. The Land Ordinance of 1785, you need to know the Land Ordinance of 1785 sets up townships 6 miles by 6 miles, and this land is going to be surveyed and sold in an orderly, again, a coherently rational, fair way. Land will be distributed, and every 16th section is saved for the purposes of education, for local schools. And this is followed in 1787 by the Northwest Ordinance, which is going to do a couple of things. It's going to abolish slavery north of the Ohio River, and this would be current-day Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, what would be Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. And 5,000 settlers can set up their own government, their own legislature. They can be self-governing, and 60,000 can request Congress to come in as a free and equal state as long as they have a democratic constitution. These are the successes, basically the distribution, the allotment, the allocation of this western land. The weaknesses are why we don't have the Articles of Confederation anymore and why we went to the Constitution. The weaknesses are there's no president. Now, if you're really a trivia buff here, there is a person who presides who's the president of the Congress, but they're not separate from it. They're not what we would call a separate independent chief executive. There's no president, there's no national courts, there's no power to tax. All taxes are voluntary quotas. With no taxes, there's no army, there's debt, there's the distribution of inflated money, this bogus paper money. Any laws need a supermajority, which locks up the Congress essentially into inertia, and to change the Articles of Confederation themselves takes a 13 out of 13 vote. So this is pretty much a do-nothing government, and if you remember our discussions in class and our activity, this is the government that people wanted right after the war. They found their identity in their states, and the states were places of very lively, active, participatory government, and people were quite happy not to surrender power to some faraway government which might oppress them like King George III did. Shays' Rebellion is going to be this turning point where there's a rebellion by the farmers in western Massachusetts who are being overtaxed, and they are not able to pay these taxes. Their property is being foreclosed. They're being thrown in jail. And the results of this are the rebellion will be put down by the Massachusetts government in Boston, but there's going to be this fear of chaos and anarchy, and there's this call to meet in Philadelphia for the purposes of strengthening and revising the Articles of Confederation to give this government a little bit more power. Shays' Rebellion is similar to some early rebellions you should be familiar with. In 1676, you've got Bacon's Rebellion, these poor farmers on the frontier who are not being represented, who are being overtaxed, and who have problems with the Indians. And there's other rebellions. Remember Leisler's Rebellion in New York, this oppression of the Eastern elite. The Regulators, again, oppression by the Eastern elite. And the Paxton Boys, these farmers in western Pennsylvania who are rebelling against the more eastern government. So you have in the the pre-revolutionary and post-revolutionary war, you have these uprisings of the poor against those who feel that they're oppressing them. 1788, there is a constitutional convention. Again, the purpose here is to fix the articles. What happens is essentially what I would say is a coup d'etat, kind of an overthrow, a kind of a quiet democratic overthrow of this existing government, and the creation of a constitution, which wasn't on the agenda, which creates a much stronger government for the purpose of keeping order. And why some people would oppose this new constitution, again, this fear of a strong government, a fear of a government that will tax and will boss you around and be oppressive. And remember, these people are the anti-federalists, and those who want the new constitution are the federalists. The ratification of this new constitution will only take a 9 out of 13 vote instead of 13 out of 13, and it will be done by either state legislatures or state conventions. This is kind of an end run around the existing Democratic legislatures in the states. And the small states, the attitude of small states is kind of interesting. Delaware is eager to sign up. They're the first to join, and Rhode Island is the last to join. Rhode Island feels that they're in danger of being pushed around, and they're going to join several years after the Constitution is ratified, creating this new government. Differences with the early Articles of Confederation. Think of all the things the Articles didn't have. There was no president. Now there's a president. There's no national courts. Now there are national courts. There's no ability to tax. Now there is the ability of tax. You see that in the Whiskey Rebellion when Washington forcibly collects taxes that were democratically levied. There is debt under the Articles. Debt is paid off under Hamilton's economic plan. And you have this change from a flimsy, weak government, which Washington called a creature tottering at every step, to a government that was credible and had strength. First Amendment. Out of all the 10 amendments, this is the one you definitely should know. This would be collectively the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. George Washington's administration, political differences between Jefferson and Hamilton. These guys are 180 degrees opposites. Jefferson believes in a small government, a limited government, a government of strict construction where you don't do anything that the Constitution says you can't, or anything that the Constitution doesn't say you can do. And Hamilton believes in a strong government with loose construction, and based upon that necessary and proper clause, the government should do what it needs to do for the common good, the general welfare. Jefferson is pro-France. He's a little pro-revolution. Hamilton is pro-England. Jefferson is pro-farmers. Hamilton is pro-cities and industry. So these guys are sort of philosophically, ideologically very different in how they see the framework, the structure, the purpose, the size of government. And Washington, part of his genius here is he's embracing all these different people in his administration. Jefferson, of course, is the Secretary of State. Hamilton is the Secretary of the Treasury. Jefferson is a person who supports the common man, and Hamilton is a person who is very suspicious of sort of the unwashed masses. 1789 is the revolution in France, which is going to create a problem. The French are going to request our assistance as the rest of Europe goes to war trying to snuff out this revolution. And Washington, in his proclamation of neutrality, is going to beg off getting involved. He basically violates the treaty we signed with the French after the Battle of Saratoga, which, remember, they came in on our side as allies, giving us money and credit and soldiers and ships and fighting the war with us and for us. We're going to renege. And it's probably wise we did this because we're not very strong, as we'll see later in the War of 1812. But Washington says that we will be friends of all, enemies of none. And it's controversial because it seems like the cause of freedom is needs an ally, needs assistance from us at this time, and we are not holding up our part of this alliance. Hamilton's three-part economic plan. Part one is paying off the debt. He's funding at par. He's paying off the IOUs at the value that they say they should be paid. And a lot of these IOUs, a lot of these war bonds had been sold off to investors, to speculators, to those who, on just pennies on the dollar, bought them from the Revolutionary War veterans. And what this does is it gives the government credibility. It gives the government believability that we will pay our debts. This is called the Assumption Bill, because not only does the federal government pay its own debts, but it pays the debts of all the states. It's trying to get all the states on board backing the government here. The southern states have largely paid their debts where the northern states haven't, and a deal is cut moving the capital from New York down to what becomes Washington, D.C., basically swampland on the Potomac River between Virginia and Maryland. Keep in mind, these are northern southern states, but they are southern slave states. And this is all comes out of this what's called the first report on public credit, Washington's plan to pay off the debt. And what actually happens here is he's going to borrow money to pay off old money, so a new debt replaces the old debt. But what's happening here is for the next, well, up until today's date as we speak, and as you listen here, the United States has always paid its debt. We are the safest place on the planet for people to loan money to because we pay it back on time with interest. And that's largely due to Hamilton. The tariff is the second point in his economic plan. The plan here, remember, he is pro-business, pro-industry, pro-city, pro-urban, and he wants to protect what's called domestic or infant industry from the powerhouse of the day. The industrial colossus is Great Britain. They're making good quality products at a low price, and they're basically swamping the American market. And Hamilton is protecting our business by putting up a trade barrier. This is called a protective tariff. There's this distinction here. Revenue tariff is to make money, but the protective tariff is not for the primary purpose of making money, but also to keep just foreign goods out. You're not expecting Americans to buy these goods because the tariff is so high. And thirdly, he sets up a bank, a national bank called the Bank of the United States. And the plan here is to pool government money with the money of rich investors to provide capital for investment, people building roads, people building these early textile mills and factories. The idea here is to promote industry. And this is a vision of Hamilton. The Whiskey Rebellion is a famous contrast with Shays' Rebellion. Remember Shays' Rebellion? These exploited, oppressed farmers rise up because they're being overtaxed, and there's really nobody to stop them. Kind of, there's this fear of chaos and anarchy. And the contrast here is the Whiskey Rebellion is against a democratically passed bill taxing whiskey, which is one of these products on the western frontier, and the western Pennsylvanians rise up and protest, and Washington marches an army and he crushes the Whiskey Rebellion. There's no shooting, but several are arrested and they're tried and they're jailed, and the government now can enact a tax and people have to pay it. It's the price of having government, is to pay for it. John Adams, next president. He is for 2 terms the Federalist Vice President of Washington, who steps down, creating a precedent of a 2-term presidency. And John Adams is going to be on the side of the English. He is anti-France. He is fearful of French revolutionary ideas coming to the United States. And he is going to have the Federalist Congress pass, and he will sign into bill the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Alien Act increases the time. The Alien Act allows him to deport, allows him to kick out suspected radicals. The Naturalization Act increases the time to become a citizen from 7 years to 14 years. The purpose here is to keep out revolutionaries, to keep out troublemakers, kind of like Trump in his campaign is saying that he's going to keep out jihadists and Muslim troublemakers here. The Sedition Act is an act specifically punishing criticism of the government. And this is going to be a violation of the First Amendment. And it's been argued that Adams is a one-term president because of this violation. We put in Thomas Jefferson, who will repeal all of these acts, especially the Sedition Act. But the Sedition Act is going to pull up in its net a bunch of Republican journalists and editors and throw them in jail. And John Adams is on the hunt here for those who are supporting the French Revolution, who are dissidents, who are seditious. Virginia and Kentucky will pass resolutions defying the Alien and Sedition Acts, and the principle here is states' rights. This is the idea that the states have the right to interpose themselves between a national law and their people if they feel this is unconstitutional. And how is this similar to anti-federalist constitutional concerns? Remember, the anti-federalists are concerned about a oppressive, tyrannical national government reaching into their states, punishing people, oppressing them, and Virginia and Kentucky will not obey. They will not comply. Shades of the Confederacy, which is created in 1860, leading to the Civil War, which breaks out in 1861. As we move forward, start taking a look at where the South and sometimes the North is going to rebel against, is going to refuse to comply with national laws coming out of Washington. The XYZ affair under John Adams, this is where there's what's called the quasi-naval war. Between 1798 and 1800, the French are going to seize hundreds of American ships that are trading with the English, trading with their enemy. We're going to send over diplomats to negotiate with the French, and they are going to demand a bribe. And when this is found out, they call this the XYZ affair because our three diplomats are going to be nicknamed X, Y, and Z, because this was supposed to be kept secret, but it's revealed in the press. And the issue here is really the dignity and the sovereignty of the United States. And there's some call for war against France. And Adams, who is anti-France, keeps the peace. He keeps the neutrality. He keeps us out of foreign affairs, to great cost to himself, losing much of the support of his party here. The Midnight Justices, these are when Adams loses the election. Not only do the Federalists lose the presidency, but they lose the Senate and they lose the House. And the plan here is to hang on to the the judiciary, which has a majority of Federalists in it, actually has all Federalists in it because that's who's been appointing them, but they add new justices. These are last minute. These are the midnight justices. There's this guy named Marbury who is going to receive an appointment. He's going to receive a commission, but he doesn't receive the piece of paper, and the new Jefferson administration will refuse to give this to him. And the person that is working for the Jefferson administration, Mr. Madison, who I believe here is Secretary of State, will refuse to give the commission to Marbury, and this goes to the Supreme Court, can, under what's called a writ of mandamus, which is a power that Congress gave, Congress gave to the president, and that is, it's a writ of mandamus is an order to do what you're supposed to do here. The Supreme Court is going to rule this writ of mandamus power to be unconstitutional, and in doing so, they're going to rule that they're going to not even rule, they're going to take the power, which is not actually explicitly in the Constitution. They have the right to declare any law unconstitutional. So the law of judicial review, to review laws for their constitutionality, comes out of Marbury versus Madison, this case dealing with the Midnight Justices and the Judiciary Act of 1801, which was a plan basically to pack the courts. Thomas Jefferson is the third president, a transition here from one party to another after 12 years of the Federalists, 2 terms Washington, 1 of Adams. Well, now we go to the Republicans, and under Thomas Jefferson in 1803, he is going to violate his principles, his small government principles, his strict construction principles, that you should only do what the Constitution says. The Constitution doesn't say you can buy half a continent from a French military dictator, and he does just this. He buys Louisiana from Napoleon, and the purposes here are to open up the port of New Orleans for trade. Remember, there have been problems here earlier under the Washington administration, and he sees buying this land is providing enough acreage, enough property here for 1,000 years for the independent yeoman, the independent farmer, to have land to farm freely. Countries interfering with U.S. trade after independence, again, these are France and the British, who fight this long war, essentially from 1789 all the way till 1815. We're claiming neutrality, we're trading with the French, we're trading with the British. They're both picking off our ships, they're confiscating the ships and the cargo. The British are impressing our sailors into their navy, basically dragooning them, conscripting them. And this is going to be sort of a lingering, festering sore that is going to break out into the War of 1812. Under the fourth president, we have James Madison. A U.S. response to this interference with our trade, Jefferson is going to pass what's called the Embargo Act, forbidding trade with all foreign countries. He's going to shut down international trade, and the purpose here is to target the French and the British, who need our trade. And the French are very slyly going to agree to comply to this, and at the beginning of the war, it's going to be the British who continue to grab our sailors and our ships and our cargoes. So you have this Embargo Act, and this is later going to be replaced by what's called the Non-Intercourse Act, which specifically says, okay, just no trade with France and with Great Britain. And again, the French will sort of pretend here to comply, sort of forcing, changing the antagonism, which originally is against France, to antagonism against Great Britain. And this war will break out, sort of a second war of American independence in 1812. So there you have it. Here's our review for Unit 3. And make sure you know what's everything that's on this review sheet. You should have read the book. You should have looked at a review book for maybe some synopsis. Look over your notes. Feel free to look at Crash Course and Tom Ritchie videos, which are really excellent. Those are out on YouTube as well. And good luck. See you when we meet for the test.